Let's cover Area 1, Task Alpha, Knowledge Area 2 in the Private Pilot ACS. For this knowledge area, you're going to want to make sure that you review the following references: 6169, 6189, 61113, and 91146. We want to understand the privileges and limitations of both a student pilot as well as a private pilot. So just like in Knowledge Area 1, Knowledge Area 2, we're going to want to look at 6189. This is going to be the general limitations for a student pilot. The student pilot may act as a pilot in command or PIC of an aircraft only when authorized by flight instructors and subjected to the following privileges. The student pilots can only operate solo flights if they've received the proper training and endorsements from their CFI. They'll also need to carry their student pilot certificate as well as their logbook endorsements during this trip. Then we also have solo cross-country flights. It's important to note that for a cross-country flight in general aviation is considered anything over 50 nautical miles. However, as a student pilot, anything over 25 nautical miles is considered a cross-country flight. It's also important to note, unless that flight is of 50 nautical miles, you're not going to log it as cross-country time in your logbook as a student pilot. You're just going to fall under cross-country regulations as a student pilot. Whenever a student pilot is traveling solo over 25 nautical miles from their original departure point, you're going to have recent ground and flight training from your CFI. You're also going to have additional endorsements from your CFI for these flights. Night flights have their own set of rules as well for student pilots. You can only operate an aircraft solo at night if you've received the specific training in takeoff, approaches, and landings at night, and you have an endorsement from your CFI within the last 90 days. There are also special solo endorsements that you may need depending on where you're doing your training. The student pilot can only operate in Class Bravo airspace if they've received specific training for that specific Bravo airspace and they've been endorsed by their CFI to do so. There's also 12 Bravo airspaces that you just can't even receive an endorsement for. So these are the privileges that you can exercise as a student pilot as long as you have the appropriate endorsement. Now, under that same regulation, 6189, we do find a lot of limitations. That's the title for that reg. A student pilot cannot carry passengers under any circumstances. You cannot be compensated and you cannot fly for business. You cannot act as a PIC for compensation to carry property for hire or in furtherance of a business. You do have weather and visibility restrictions that you need to adhere to. You'll always need at least 3 statute miles of visibility during the day and 5 statute miles at night. You're not permitted to do any international flights. Now, there are some exceptions that apply if you are doing your flight training in Alaska and you're close to Canada. You're not allowed to participate in multi-crew operations. You are never allowed to act as a required crew member for any flight. So let's take a look at the privileges for a private pilot. These are going to fall under 61113. Now, a private pilot may act as a pilot in command of an aircraft for pleasure, personal business, but they may not act as PIC for compensation or hire, except for the following exceptions. Pro rata cost sharing. A private pilot may split the operating expenses of a flight with passengers, but only for fuel, oil, airport expenses, and aircraft rental fees. So let's say you are going to take a friend up and he wants to help compensate you for the flight. And you pay $200 for the aircraft, you pay another $100 for the gas, and there is a tie-down fee of $50. The total cost of this experience is going to be $350. This means that your friend can only compensate you $175, as that is half of the cost of the flight. And no, he can't pay for your lunch at the destination or for the hotel. All of those would be considered compensation. Another exception is incidental business flights. A private pilot may fly in connection with business or employment if the flight is incidental and does not involve carrying passengers or property for compensation. If you own your own business and you're taking two people with you in your business to a meeting at another location, you can write that flight off on the business, but you yourself cannot be compensated for flying that flight. Another exemption is charity and community events. A private pilot may participate in a charitable or a nonprofit event as long as that event meets 91-146. You can also participate in search and rescue efforts, so you can be reimbursed for aircraft operation expenses related to a local, state, or federal search and rescue mission, but reimbursement can only cover fuel, oil, airport costs, or the aircraft rental. Let's say it costs you $200 for the aircraft rental. It costs you another $100 in gas and $50 to land and tie down at an airport and to come back. That means the search and rescue effort can cover that $350 total now. But it can't pay you an hourly rate or any additional fees. Aircraft sales demonstrations. So a private pilot with at least 200 hours of logged flight time may demonstrate an aircraft to a prospective buyer. And lastly, glider and ultralight towing. If a private pilot meets the requirements of 6169, they may tow a glider or unpowered ultralight vehicle. If you ever have questions about compensation as a private pilot, there are two great answers. One is go to 61-113 and look at the regulations around it. Then if it's about the charitable events, it will reference 91-146 and you can look at that regulation. Or if it's about the gliders and ultralights, then you can check out 61-69, which is referenced. And lastly, if you're really not sure, tell the DPE. I'm really not sure. The regulation seems a little bit vague. I would call the FSDO before I made a decision on accepting any payment for that. So those are the privileges. What about the limitations? Again, no compensation for flight services. A private pilot cannot get paid for flight services, including aerial photography, sightseeing, or cargo transport. And there are limitations for business flights. So any flight conducted for a business must be incidental to the business itself. The flight can't be the primary reason for the business operations. You can travel for meetings or to travel from location to location if your business has different sites, but the business itself can't be transporting passengers or cargo as its main source of business. And there are passenger limitations for cost sharing. When sharing flight costs with passengers, a private pilot must pay their proportional share or the pro rata share. You can't have passengers cover the entire cost of the flight or any other incidentals on that trip. And you're also going to be limited to flying VFR only. Without an instrument rating to begin, a private pilot is only going to be able to fly under VFR or visual flight rules. This means no flying in clouds or in IFR conditions. You must maintain VFR weather minimums. So an example of this would be 3 miles of visibility and 1,000 above the clouds in echo airspace. And no flights into IMC or instrument meteorological conditions. Think you got a handle on the privileges and limitations? Let's find out. So I'll ask some questions. Feel free to pause the video so you can answer these yourself before I give you the answer. You've been taking flight lessons for a few months and your friends ask if they can come on your solo practice flight. Can you take them? No. Under no circumstances can you carry passengers as a student pilot. But what about your instructor? They're always sitting next to you. Aren't they a passenger? Well, that's actually considered dual instruction. So it would be a student pilot can only fly solo or with an instructor. You're a student pilot and you want to fly 50 nautical miles away for practice. What must you do to fly there? Well, you'll need to receive cross-country flight training and get a specific endorsement from your instructor for that route. You've completed all of your daytime solo flights and now you want to practice some night flights on your own. Can you fly at night immediately? No, you have to receive specific night flight training and a logbook endorsement from your instructor, and that endorsement needs to be given within the 90 days of your flight. So let's switch over to being a private pilot. You and 3 of your friends want to take a flight from Orlando to Miami. The total cost is $400. Can your friends cover the full cost? No. You have to pay your pro rata share or your fair share of the flight. So you need to contribute at least $100, and you can't receive any additional compensation on that trip. They can't pay for your hotel room. You have to split the rental car. They can't pay for dinner. All of those would be violations. You're a business consultant and want to fly yourself to a meeting in another city. Can you log that flight as a business expense? Yes, as long as the flight is incidental to the business and you're not being paid to transport any additional passengers or cargo. A local aviation charity is hosting a fundraising event where pilots offer sightseeing flights. Can you participate as a private pilot? Yes, but only if they follow the charitable events regulations under 91-146. Now you're planning a VFR flight, but the forecast reports 2 miles visibility and overcast clouds at 800 feet. Can you depart? No, because you must maintain at least 3 miles of visibility in Class Echo airspace.